Hello, Rael. How are you? It's good to
Very
hear
well. How are you? How are you, Assaf?
everything is well here. And thank you
Good.
for coming over and having this webinar with me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for hosting. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to talk and chit chat. We met back in I think September, back
That's
in
right. Seems
Amsterdam.
a long time ago. The world was very different back then.
Definitely, and we're going to talk about it today because it's very relevant to your webinar.
Yeah.
How is everything since then?
Yeah, good. I mean, on the whole, I guess extremely positive for us. The whole sort of COVID situation is, of course, quite polarizing in terms of what our customers are having to do and what they're seeing, etc. But of course, it provides a good opportunity for us to help them guide them, through the whole process, and really dependent on sector. But I think on the whole, I would say it's forced a lot of the companies we're working with really to think about Amazon quite differently to how they used to thinking about Amazon. So some of the larger customers, Amazon's not their main channel, for instance, and they wouldn't put in a lot of resources behind it, or they sort of they wouldn't have one person that's responsible for Amazon, and they wouldn't take it that seriously. And I think now, given a lot of the offline business that they're currently used to getting, it has been wiped out or significantly diminished, etc. They're having to take online very seriously, and specifically Amazon. So I think it's been a good opportunity for us to walk our customers through that journey of what it means to take Amazon more seriously and build up a proper capability with Amazon specifically. So but on the whole, we've had customers that can't keep up with demand, and of course we've had customers on the other side of the spectrum there as well, which they're not part of the essential 6 categories that Amazon prioritized, and they've seen a drop off, etc. So really seen the whole spectrum there, but very interesting times.
I know that you are located in UK, right?
Yeah, in London.
London. How is it everything in London in relates to the Corona issue?
Yeah, it's well, as of I think 2 days ago, some of the restrictions have been released, although people are still quite confused what can and can't be done. But it's difficult, right? I mean, you've got people who are just terrible sort of economic situation, health situation, etc. I guess the support is still quite strong for lockdown amongst the public in particular. And so, it's not going to be eased in any meaningful way for at least another, I'd say, month or so. But by and large, yeah, I mean, the British people are very resilient and, and going with it, and very supportive, of course, of the health services, etc. Of course, there's, some of the tougher things to manage around, just like everybody else, right? I mean, if schools are closed, then there's a whole bunch of issues there, etc. But by and large, the British people certainly are coping.
But what I think that it's actually bring great opportunity to people that's doing e-commerce and
yeah.
Booming. Look at the stock market. Look everywhere.
It's one of the biggest confounding things about this is. All the economic macro numbers are terrible, but the stock market's, going in the other direction. So, trying to make sense of that, I guess, is quite difficult. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, e-commerce in general, the big question is how much of this is sticky behavior, right? So the people that are buying for the first time on Amazon or just generally online, how much of that behavior is actually going to persist when there is the opportunity to go back into the shops and buy things as they were before. So the jury's still out. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think my view is that some of the changes will persist, but probably not to the extent that people are thinking. I think in particular as well, I think a lot of companies are sort of hurriedly rolling out e-commerce propositions, or even just via Amazon or marketplaces in general. But I think a lot of them are going to fail, basically. I think in a year's time, a lot of them are going to sort of pull back and think that, we don't really know how to do Amazon or marketplaces or e-com properly. Let's, put the brakes on it and maybe, take a more strategic, slower sort of view towards doing it properly. So I think, as I said, a lot of them have just been forced into that position. And I have my doubts how well they're actually going to be working out in a year's time.
But on the shopper side, actually, and this is linked us to the subject for today,
Yeah.
the customer's life value is going to change because people that try now buying online will probably start adopting this kind of behavior. And this is going to affect tremendously on people that selling on Amazon, already selling on Amazon, or providing services to these people. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the great things, of course, is if people are buying online, you're able to track things a lot better. And of course, one of the big subjects today is on customer lifetime value, and we'll get into all of that. But such a key metric that's been notoriously difficult to measure if people are not buying online. Now with that shift, it becomes measurable and actionable, and of course we'll get into all those details as well.
Okay, so I know that you prepared for us something today, so let's shoot out the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
yeah, cool. That's great. So I can do a quick intro. So I'm Rael. I'm co-founder and CEO of London-based Nozzle.ai. So we're a company that's focused on helping sellers and vendors win on Amazon. So I'll let my colleague Shanil introduce himself a little bit more, and I'll go into a little more depth on our products and services.
Hey everyone, I've been very quiet. So my name is Shanil. I'm part of the business development team at Nozzle. Today I'll be pretty much covering, how can you manage your PPC, especially your ads around the COVID-19 situation, depending on what sector you fall under. And I'll be going in more details on that in the next couple of slides. So it would be my section.
Cool. So in terms of the agenda today, for us, firstly, the first thing is just sort of background to where we are. So given the huge shift in customer behavior online, what categories are winning, which ones aren't, etc. That's the first topic, and we've got some sort of data and stats around that. The second one being PPC in a COVID age. So that's going to be Shanil's section, where some very specific advice, tactical things that you can do on the PPC side on Amazon to help you improve things. And then the third one is the customer lifetime value. So this is, I guess, a topic that's quite close to my heart, which you alluded to a little bit earlier around actually measuring, what is the total contribution of each individual customer that you have on Amazon to your profits, and then all the decisions that you can make if you actually know that number. So those are the three areas. So very quickly, in terms of Nozzle, so we're about unifying and optimizing your Amazon experience. What that means is specifically, we actually take your retail data sets and use that as a basis to join to your media data sets, your advertising data sets, to help you win on Amazon. So, really understanding the full scope of your business on an individual ASIN level is really the starting point of what we like to do. Once we understand that, then we can translate that into what that means on the PPC side, for instance, on Amazon, or even the programmatic side on Amazon, on the display side. So we offer three products. The first one is a PPC audit, and so this is a self-serve tool where you can just go to our website, sign up, and generate a PPC audit on the last 60 days of your PPC activity. We will highlight wasted spend. We will highlight missed revenue opportunities. We'll give you the top terms you need to focus on to make the biggest impact on your campaign goals. So it's terms that you should be migrating, or terms that you should be bidding down or negating. This is all automated. This, as I said, is a self-serve tool where you can sign up and go and generate a very in-depth, about 14, 15-page audit on specific campaigns that you would like to analyze. The second part of what we do is what we call PPC bid management. And so that is, of course, a tool that allows you to set up PPC campaigns, optimize PPC campaigns, and report on PPC campaigns. That currently is, we're running that as a managed service, meaning Shanil and his team would be responsible for managing that on your behalf. But actually, in about 3 months' time, we are rolling that out as a self-serve product as well. So you'll be able to just go in and do that all yourself. Of course, with our sort of product expertise and algorithms helping you along the way. The third part of what we do is what we call retail analytics. And so this is plugged into the retail data sets, overlaying the ad data sets to give you a real holistic view of what's going on in your business, making recommendations on how to increase core metrics, not just sort of sales growth and things like that, but profitability, average order value, where you should be spending your ad budget. And of course, one of the big topics for today is customer lifetime value. And so that, for instance, would sit within the retail analytics. So I hope that's a good enough overview there. So changing buying patterns in a COVID age is the first topic here. So this is just a very sort of macro view. This is not data that comes from us. This is sourced from a third party. Actually, I forget the name. I should put that in the notes at the bottom there. But just comparing the year-on-year differences in people's buying behavior on a category level for e-commerce in general. So, I guess no surprises really. But I guess start off by saying that typically before the COVID pandemic, electronics, clothing tended to be the top e-commerce categories generally. I would say call it normal times, quote unquote. But really just a huge shift, obviously, comparing March this year with March last year, where all the sort of usual suspects, gloves and cough medicine and soups, all the sort of essentials rising to the top there. I guess the bit of a surprise would be the bread machines, believe it or not, appearing. But I would suspect it's such a huge percentage increase because it was off such a low base to begin with. But otherwise, packaged foods, rice and grains and things like that, all sort of doing very, very well. And then on the other side, all travel-related things and holiday-related things, of course, taking a big dip there. So luggage, briefcases, cameras, and swimwear, bridalwear, of course, all mass gathering-related things, dressing up things, all those kind of things, taking a big hit there. So, this is a very sort of obviously aggregated view, and as different countries have different timelines for slowly opening things back up, obviously these categories will change quite a bit. Although I do think global travel, for instance, I think is going to be hit hard for still quite some time.
And one thing is missing here. Is actually kids toys and kids games. Also
agreed. So it's 100%, and we've got data further on to actually illustrate that. You're absolutely right. What I think will happen is it probably shows up in like March, April, right? So this is just March versus March last year, and in particular for the UK, for instance, the lockdown only happened really in March, and I think the first phase of the lockdown is more about panic buying disposable gloves and cough medicine and all that. But once the reality sits in and there's some sort of routine that's happening, then I think the shift towards home gym equipment or home exercise and puzzles and games and kids stuff and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's would probably show up if we had to do this April versus April or something like that. But you're 100% right.
I would never imagine bread machines will come up so high.
Yeah, as I said, I think the only explanation for me is it's just off a very, very low base. And so this graph is based on percentage.
Right.
Right. And so, if you're coming off a low base, it's not that difficult, I guess, to achieve 652. I'm not one of them, by the way. I have no skills or desire, let's put it that way, to bake bread. But yeah, cool. So that's the macro view, and this is now just getting a little bit more granular. This is for the UK buying patterns, where we just tracked the most popular terms, top 5 terms on a weekly basis on Amazon in the UK, and just seeing what happens there. So we broke it up into four weeks. Sorry, that's week 2. Let me actually try. There we go. Apologies. Make it week 1 first. So capturing sort of the end of March, going into April, capturing of course the Easter period as well, which is pretty important. So you can see here although it says for adults, not not for kids on Jigsaw. It's really a mixture of, face masks, pretty constant term. It might vary in, from rank 1 to rank 3 or whatever it is, but it's always going to sort of appear there. And clearly being around Easter time, a lot of Easter related terms there as well. But then, to your point around people kind of thinking, well, this isn't just kind of a quick phase, a month-long thing. It's going to be longer than that. And so jigsaw puzzles certainly making an appearance. And it's quite a universal thing. I know this is for the UK, but we've seen that on the other Amazon data as well for Europe in particular. And then resistance bands, strangely. And so people trying to get into the sort of habit of exercising from home. And so resistance bands making an appearance there. I'll get to this kind of in the summary once I've gone through the 4 weeks, but you'll see, generally speaking, the click and conversion share, which is, the x-axis, remains quite in lockstep. So that is to say that the items that people are clicking on tend to be the ones that they're buying. Basically.
So it's a good conversion rate. There is a good conversion rate.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good conversion rate. You're not seeing people, browsing around. So they click on one thing and then they click on, a bunch of other things, and well, they might do that, but ultimately they come back to the first one, the highest ranking one, and buy that. So typically the click and conversion shares work in lockstep there. There's no major divergence between those two things.
Okay.
Second week, let me get to that. So week 2. So again, it's very Easter related there. Face masks still there, dropping to 3rd place. But hair clippers for men starts making an appearance, right? And I don't know if you've seen what my hair looks like. I certainly
desperate times.
Yeah, exactly, right. I'm certainly, I haven't bought yet, but I don't think I can hold out much longer. So I'm going to be one of those as well, buying. So you can see something like clippers though, and face masks. People are a little less certain about what to buy. So this is where a little bit of divergence comes in between the click and conversion share, right? So people probably would check out a couple products, maybe not buy the first one they clicked on for hair clippers and face masks. But when it comes to Easter eggs, right? So numbers 1, 2, and 5, those are pretty closely matched, to their click share, basically. We can go to week 3. Pretty much the same as week 2, but interestingly with the appearance of Lego now in there. So one of the Easter related, so obviously, Easter is over, so the Easter terms fall out, and then Lego makes an appearance. So interestingly for us, from the data we're seeing, Lego is just evergreen, right? Before the COVID pandemic, Lego was just kind of consistently in the top 5 pretty much across all geographies. And although it kind of got pushed out of the top 5 because of pandemic related terms or Easter related terms, etc., it's never far from the top 5. And indeed, it is in the top 5 already in week 3. So it's just an evergreen term. And then the last week here is, it's particularly in the UK, very weather related, right? So the new appearances there from sun loungers. People quite undecided which sun loungers they want to be buying, so they tend to click around. So the click share is not necessarily reflected in the same conversion share. If you can see over there where my cursor is there. So again, very, very UK specific in terms of very weather related, and in particular over that period, we had some great weather here, so people immediately reflected in the search terms there. So I guess in summary, after studying this for 4 weeks, I've got an overly sensitive mouse. Apologies. Wow, it's not allowing me to do much. Cool. There you go. So so really summarizing four trends. So the first one being seasonal purchasing continues, right? And so whether that's sun lounges that I've just been speaking about in the 4th week, and certainly, of course, Easter-related terms there as well. People still making them, so it's not all completely just dominated by face masks and toilet paper and hand sanitizers. And then trend 2, people are certainly settling into quarantine life. So the resistance bands that we've seen there, the puzzles that we've seen there, people starting to make purchases and realizing, look, it's not sort of a quick fix, this whole sort of lockdown scenario. The same products aren't dominating the search term. So this is actually not something that I discussed before. That if you, for instance, if I go back to week 3 and you look at resistance bands, you look at the actual term there, the top ranking term, which is that bionics exercise resistance bands and workout fitness set. You can see it's actually changed in week 4, for instance. So resistance bands is still there, but it's actually a different ASIN now. And that's kind of reflected in the difference between the click and the conversion share. So people, will click on one of the results, but they'll end up buying another ASIN. So they're kind of undecided on resistance bands, which kind of means that, people are quite new to this. They're kind of looking, I guess is more of a hypothesis than anything else, but they kind of haven't really bought resistance bands before. It's probably they may have used them in the gym, but unaware of what kind of brand it is, for instance. And so just kind of looking around, using it as browsing as well, and trying to get information on what to buy. So
I think the other thing as well is because resistance band doesn't fall under essential category. So you won't be allowed to send it to VA. So there was a lot of shipping time differences among some of these products. So
very true.
We can influence that as well.
Very true. Very true. And the fourth one is, kind of what I've been saying there, bar sort of one or two ASINs, but one or two terms rather, but click and conversion share are pretty much in lockstep. There's not much of a gap between the dark blue and the green bars there. Generally speaking, of course, resistance bands is the one we've called out in sun lounges, but by and large, there's not too much of a big gap between those two things. So that's kind of the takeaway after looking at a month's worth of data from the end of March to pretty much the end of April. There, this is clearly something we will carry on tracking. With interesting to also kind of track these things on here in the UK specifically. There was an announcement of some easing of the restrictions on Sunday night, I believe it was. So it's checking how that changes from Monday this week onwards. And there's also a bit of a roadmap saying, on the 1st of June, if everything goes well, then schools will reopen. And, so it's interesting to see what happens this month. Are people kind of bringing forward purchases, with a view to June already, or are they just sort of taking it, one thing at a time? That's only the stuff that's been announced and effective right now. Are they searching for? So those sort of patterns we'll certainly be tracking and publishing as well. So the second topic here is PPC in a COVID age. And so this is where Shanil will take over. And this is, very much focused on, what do I actually do? If I'm running PPC campaigns, should I be running PPC campaigns? Where do I focus my budgets? What metrics should I, focus on? How do I focus on my time? What things, all those sorts of questions. So I'll hand over to Shanil for that.
So I'll be talking about what are the strategies that you should be following or should be considering following, as in depending on what sector you fall under. Now, as in over the last kind of couple of days or last week itself, Amazon has really eased on some of the restriction that imposed on some of sellers and brands. So, for example, now you're able to run vouchers and promotion again, which is a big thing, as well as, if you're selling non-essential goods, you're able to send that to FBA. So everything's kind of pretty much going back to normal because, certain shipping time for certain FBA product has come down quite a lot compared to a couple of weeks ago. So as in all of this together does impact, the strategies that you should be using in terms of your PPC. So
I guess as well, just very, very quickly, I mean, Amazon is, eased up a little bit on some of these restrictions, but it's not to say that they can't happen again, right? Yeah, and so, exactly. So much of the focus, I guess, particularly throughout Europe, has been on avoiding. Now the worst is over, and they're easing some of these restrictions. Do bear in mind that these could easily be back again. We all hope they don't come back, of course, but it could very well happen. And so it's worth bearing that in mind as well.
Yeah, so we all live in a volatile environment, so anything could happen. As in the way you kind of, I would try to keep this as broad as possible, right, and be specific at the same time. It's hard to accommodate every kind of use cases. So the way I break this down is you're either in two sectors. You're either in the high demand sectors or low demand sectors. So alluding to what Rael said and looking at the data, if you're selling things like luxurious goods, clothing, and certain appliances that are not deemed as essential, in most cases, you're seeing a drop in demand in your products and sector. Whereas if you're in a high demand sector, for example, face masks, hand sanitizer, home workout equipment, certainly things are picking up quite a bit. So as in, depending on the two, your strategies will be very much different. Now, let's take the first point. If you are in a low demand sector, as in your main kind of focus should probably be focused on profitability. So things like if you're running, any sort of advertising on Amazon, you should be considering, reducing your budget towards more of the top of funnel advertising, so sponsored brand, sponsored displayed. So any sort of advertising that, are not focused towards conversion optimization should be, you should reduce your budget towards that. As in more, your budget should probably be considered going towards sponsored products, specifically towards the exact match and async targeting campaigns. The reason is you have a more granular control on what search term you're bidding on for exact and async targeting. Because if you're bidding on, for example, resistance band, you know that if a customer search resistance band, your ad will be shown for it, not any variation of search terms, compared to broad, because a particular keyword could accommodate a variation of search terms. You don't have no real control on the search term that you're bidding on. So if you are in that low sector and seeing a drop in demand, identifying what are the keywords that's performing the best, meaning which one has the highest conversion, and really rank it to the highest conversion and allocate more your budget towards the highest converting search terms. Now, the one with the low conversion, you want to, really know your ACoS target first, your break-even ACoS target. So once you work this out, you want to make sure that you optimize your bids to make sure that you're falling within your break-even ACoS targets. You're not losing money. So I think right now with these kind of low demand sectors, it's more about staying agile, staying lean, and trying to survive this kind of pandemic. And hopefully, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel when things kind of ease up a little bit. Now, the second kind of sector is the high demand sector. So this is, this point here is kind of the sweet spot. So if you're seeing an increase in sales and you've kind of taken care of your supply chain issues, meaning you're keeping stock and you're able to fulfill it, these are kind of perfect time where, you've seen an uptick in demand. So these are time where you should really capitalize on. So any budget that you have set in the future for your sponsored product or any other advertising that you do on Amazon, it's kind of a good idea to kind of bring it forward, because the demand and the time to capitalize on this, on this pandemic is right now. So bringing your budget forward and allocating more budget towards your sponsored product is a good idea to, for example, you can be running your sponsored product, sponsored brand, because, more people are using, Amazon. So capturing that increase in impressions, increase in reach is a perfect way to get your brand out there. The second point is, alluding to what I said, we are in a very volatile time right now. There's new regulations being introduced, new policies. We're still in a very confused world. So we still don't know what's going to happen. So this is kind of reflecting in the consumer behavior. So things are changing on a daily basis, meaning that, you should expect, your performance as well for certain keywords to be changing very frequently. So I'll advise, at least the bare minimum to optimize and to check, your metrics every other day, or as in the bare minimum every other day. But if you can, daily would be a good idea. As in some of the key metrics that I tend to look for is conversion rate, ACoS, and CPC. Now, as in all of these metrics are interdependent. For example, if you've seen an increase in ACoS, as in most cases, it could be your conversion rate decrease and your CPC has increased. So again, keeping a close eye on this and make sure that you optimize your budgets and your bid accordingly to these metrics, and staying agile, I think is a good way of going forward. And the first point is just being more aware and just analyzing the whole landscape of your competitors. So as demand is picking up, certain of your competitors in most cases would probably not be able to fulfill this demand. They don't have sufficient stock. They're probably facing a supply chain issue. So if there are tools out there that can identify the stock level of your competitors and other sellers in the market. So if you've kind of noticed, certain of your competitors are running out of stock, and in most cases will probably be scaling back on their advertising, meaning there will be less bidders in the auction, meaning CPC will be cheaper. So it's a perfect way to improve and have a cheaper acquisition cost, meaning your conversion, you'll be more profitable if you do win if you do convert.
I want to ask that there too for the first point.
Yeah.
First, that's one thing that I've seen with some other sellers, that if you have low demand for a product, maybe you should reduce the cost, reduce the budget for doing. I think this is the most important thing to do, because then you just spend a lot of money, and people will not buy a product because it will be shipped in 1 month or 1 month and a half.
Yeah. So a couple of things to say on that. So, I mean, when we say focus on profitability, it might only mean that in order to focus on profitability, you do have to drop the budget, because otherwise there's not, they're not enough profitable terms to go around, to do that. Or if you increase your budget, it's going to go from profitable to unprofitable. So yeah, I mean, it often results in a drop in budgets if you just focus on profitability. So I totally agree with you on that. On the other point, it's quite interesting where we've seen some cases where, it's more of a sort of tactical thing, that if you can ship something faster, I think we mentioned this on the next slide, but if you can ship things faster than your competitors, firstly, you probably have a higher chance of winning the buy box, but often we would see behavior that someone would click on the ad, see that the delivery is going to take, I don't know, a few weeks or a month or whatever it is, and then not buy anything as a result. And so your conversion rate suffers as a result of that, and you're paying money for the clicks, of course. But actually, we saw that starting to change again, which is, people kind of okay with that, or they've tried to find it somewhere else with the same shipping times, and they're like, okay, I might as well come back to Amazon and do that. So it was quite temporary where we saw the drop off in conversion rate for some products. I mean, clearly now there's another phenomenon, I would say, that's going on, where people tend to be browsing a lot more because there's more sort of time online and things like that, and so there's no real intention of buying stuff. So they might click on an ad and not really buy it right now. They might add it to a wish list, or I don't know, some of that sort of behavior going on, more browsing than very, very bottom of funnel demand driven behavior, which we typically associate with Amazon. So those are kind of the two effects we're seeing there. But it's interesting that we did see that kind of bounce back in conversion rate.
Another thing that I want to add into that, is if you want to talk about specific tactics, product targeting on, doing the research on product targeting campaigns are very relevant now, especially when some of your competitors are out, and you can utilize, let's say, less or weaker competitors than your product. So
yeah, absolutely.
Focus on
that. I mean, 100%. I mean, some of our tools will provide the information not just on where you should use your product targeting, ASIN targeting, etc. But we could also even prioritize and say, well, these products in particular have fewer reviews than yours, or a higher price than yours, etc. Right? So you can actually start prioritizing where to spend your ASIN targeting based on that criteria as well, for sure. And in general, I think product targeting is being underutilized. We've seen some pretty good results from it, and a lot of the PPC audits that we do, there would be people wouldn't even be running any product targeting campaigns, but actually have a lot of converting ASINs at a very, very good ACOS coming from auto campaigns, for instance.
Definitely. Oh, it's a good place there on the search terms in auto campaigns to find your competitors. Definitely.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Back to you, Shanil.
As in, the fourth point is essentially if you're facing stock issues, so facing a supply chain issue. As in terms of what you can do is very limited in terms of, as in the only thing is to get the stock as quick as possible through air shipment, wherever you can, as quick as possible. As in the bare minimum, what you should probably consider doing is the budget that you have allocated for the product that's facing inventory issue, simply shifting that budget and reallocate it towards other products in your portfolio that's seeing an uptick in demand or converting very well, or one of your best sellers. So really being agile and flexible in terms of shifting that budget across to other product range that you have, and having the awareness to do that as well. Now, one thing you should really be careful is, as in I've seen this actually happen kind of 2 to 3 weeks ago, is increasing your price. So a story, as in 2 weeks ago, a brand that we manage, they went within their account and increased their price about 10% across the whole portfolio. So Amazon actually classed that as price gouging, so they end up losing the buy box. They had a big decrease in conversion rate, and we know one of the big factor when it comes to Amazon algorithm is they look at the conversion rate. So the whole organic ranking decreased as well. So it did have a big kind of negative impact on the overall performance. So I'll probably suggest if you are facing image issue, don't raise your price too much where you're gonna end up losing the buy box, because this will impact your organic ranking overall. And when you do end up getting back in stock, you probably take you a while to climb up the rank again. So I think the best bet is just keep the price and run out of stock, but just shift the budget across from the one that's facing inventory issue towards other products that you have, you can fulfill the inventory. As in the fifth point, which which Rael was talking about in terms of optimization and focusing on converting search terms. So if you're facing a campaign that is seeing a bad ACoS because of the pandemic, because of a decrease in demand or whatever it is, rather than pausing the campaign altogether, you really want to drill into the data, understand what is the keyword or what is the search term that's actually contributing towards that high ACoS. So there may be a particular keyword in there that had the majority of the clicks, or when you look deeper, it could be a particular search term that had the majority of the click that's not converting, that's causing that wasted spend. So rather than pausing the campaign, drill into the data and go very granular, understand what is the search term that's actually causing that performance.
I mean, just a bit of a, I guess, anecdotal story here is, we had a customer when we first onboarded them. Of course, we do the sort of PPC audit as one of the first tasks, and it uncovered the customer had spent, gosh, it was a couple thousand even on the broad match for Amazon Prime, like something like that. So it could.
It was really, auto, yeah.
Yeah, it was auto, fine, and so it could really just be stuff like that. If you're not sort of alert, you could really waste a whole lot of money on Amazon Prime of all things. So don't just look at an ACoS, because ACoS is obviously an aggregate of a whole bunch of other ACoSs on a sort of keyword level, right? And so go look at the culprits and the outliers, and that could improve things. We would certainly recommend doing that first before looking at some sort of overall ACoS and thinking you just need to pause a campaign.
Yeah. I think the second to last point is down to really back in the days, as in when I'm going to say back in the days, 4 to 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, you could get away with just pushing a lot of budget towards a newly launched product or a product that doesn't have sufficient sales velocity, and push a lot of PPC towards that and hoping it will increase in organic ranking. But as we've seen an increase in competition and a lot of brands are becoming very sophisticated on Amazon, you need to have your listing needs to be retail ready, as in Amazon does have a criteria for retail readiness, meaning certain amount of images, bullet points, A+ content, and most importantly as well, the review rating, right? If you're putting money towards a product that's in a high demand sector, but doesn't have the sufficient review rating compared to other products in the market, then essentially you could you're essentially putting money behind something that's not going to succeed, because there's other product out there that's performing far better in terms of having the sufficient reviews and the sufficient rating to outperform you. So just be careful in terms of where you allocate in your budget, and make sure that your product has sufficient retail readiness to make sure that it competes well and converts well on when running PPC. And the final point is it's more down to the consumer forward buying, so buying in bulk. So I think that was I think we're long past that phase now. That was more towards the initial phase of lockdown, where we saw consumer buying in bulk, especially if you look at toilet papers, also protein as well. Some of one of our clients was seeing the consumer buying a lot of protein bulk buying. So if you're still facing such demand for your product where the consumer bulk buying, to really encourage your consumer to buy more in bulk, it would be a good idea to introduce a bundle packs. But one thing you have to be mindful is if you do introduce bundle packs, you have to be sending it to either FBA or merchant fulfill as a bundle pack itself and creating a new listing. And as Amazon has reintroduced promotion again, and I don't know for how long, you can always run a promotion for 3 for 2, or buy 2 and get 10% off. So you can always kind of create some sort of incentive to increase the likelihood of allowing your consumer to buy bundles and packs, which will again improve your AOV and improve your ACoS overall.
Yeah, I think it's just to add a little bit to that, it's you got to be a little bit careful with this one, because you just don't know how long the forward buying is going to last, right? So people are buying these multi-packs, that's fine, but when they've bought a whole bunch of I don't know, toilet paper or 3 for 2s or whatever it is, and so you've got to just if you're going to do that sort of thing, then you need to monitor that very, very closely to see when that starts falling off again, because people have just bought it and obviously not going to come back for a longer period of time, etc. So you can certainly, if it's a strong signal that it's happening, then sure, you can do all those things and put some ad spend behind it, but just monitor very quickly, because it will eventually fall off. Cool.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So that's the end of the second topic there. The third one is on customer lifetime value there. So I guess, Assaf, is there anything you want to discuss on the optimization tips there?
No, I think it is a great tip for this specific period of time. I think, again, product targeting I've seen working very well in this period of time.
Yeah.
One
Agreed.
of the favorite tactics I like to use. And I think that understanding the right search terms, understanding how to do the research is very important to succeed now in PPC.
Yeah, absolutely. And that probably, if you're using Amazon's tools, it probably still requires quite a lot of work to do, but there are a lot of other tools out there that can, help you focus on expedite that process, shall we say. We say this to all our clients that, at the end of the day, for PPC to work well, it really assumes that a whole bunch of other things are in place and working well, right? You need to have a good listing and a good product. You need to obviously not be running out of inventory and all that sort of stuff. So, clearly, especially in such sort of extreme times, you should spend the majority of your time on those other tasks, right? You should really take a step back and make sure you have a robust business there. Sort out the supply chains, which are really tough, right? I mean, the sea and air freights, the prices on air freights have gone through the roof, and all that kind of stuff. So, but it does mean though that when it does come to the PPC side of things, once you've sorted all those things out, then you need to be looking. You can't just look at a sort of overall some aggregated ACoS number and make decisions off the back of that. You need to go through that search term report, either using Amazon or whatever tools you're using, and make those decisions. You just don't have the luxury of not doing that.
One of the things that you want to discuss is about how to calculate the ACoS, and this is one thing that I'm very attached to, because it's really not about just how much the advertising costs. It's really about a bunch of things that you're probably going to discuss about that happening in order to evaluate correctly your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this idea of customer lifetime value, which I'll get onto very, very shortly, is especially well timed now, because a lot of businesses, Amazon businesses, are forced to think about profitability. Where do I focus my area? What are the best performing ASINs where I need to focus on? I can't do all these things at the same time. I can't keep running hundreds or thousands of ASINs. Let me just focus on the stuff that's really working in the most profitable terms. All of that sort of stuff. You're just very much forced to think about that right now. And this metric of customer lifetime value is really going to help you make those sorts of decisions. So let me get into that. So what is customer lifetime value? So the first thing is just definition, which is the total net profit from any given customer over the period which you have a relationship with that particular customer. And so it's probably best illustrated with a typical journey. So let's go to stage 1 there, where, let's say for argument's sake, a user comes in via one of your PPC campaigns and they make a purchase, which is great. And then, of course, best case scenario is when they make the second purchase, they now do a subscribe and save, which is also fantastic. Then they carry on purchasing 2 more times, so stage 3 and stage 4. And for whatever reason, come stage 5, they churn, which means they stop buying from you, and you don't have a relationship with that customer anymore. And so that's just the life cycle of a typical customer. And so the lifetime value is just adding, how much profit are you in total over the entire period does that customer actually contribute? Now, I guess one sort of big caveat here is not all products lend themselves to repeat purchases, right? I mean, typically a very high priced item, if you're buying, televisions and furniture and things like that, those are not, lifetime value is probably a little less useful. You can still do it, but obviously the interval between purchases, buying a TV and your next TV is going to be years and years, or even furniture for that matter. But having said that, there are loads of products where this is very, very, very useful. So a lot of consumer packaged goods, a lot of supplements, food related items, all the grocery shopping, all those sorts of things where lend themselves for repeat purchases ultimately are really good candidates for this sort of metric. And so the last thing just at the bottom there, where customer lifetime value, CLV. So if the idea being, if your customer lifetime value is larger than your customer acquisition cost, so how much do you actually have to pay to acquire a new user? In simplistic terms, this is, let's call it just advertising spend. It varies on product to product and business to business. There could be a bunch of other customer types of costs that go into it. But as I said, just to keep it very simplistic, let's just say it's the amount of PPC spend to acquire a new customer. So if your customer lifetime value is greater than the amount you spend acquiring that customer, then of course, that's great. You're good to go and you're making an overall profit. Of course, if it's the other way around, where your customer acquisition cost is larger than your customer lifetime value, then you're not in a good spot. Ultimately, you're not going to be running a profitable business. And so why should you care about customer lifetime value? And so there are 2 very, very good reasons here why you should care. So number 1 being, it's much easier to sell to an existing customer than to a new one, right? And I think most people have kind of heard this, but there's very, very good data behind this over long periods of time and very robust studies on that. But existing customers are about 50% more likely to try new products and spend 31% more when compared to new customers, right? And so it's just a much easier job that if you're doing a new product launch or something, a new variation or whatever it is, they're much more likely to buy it, and they're more likely to spend more money as well. And so the probability of selling to an existing customer is 60 to 70% versus 2 to 20% if you're trying to sell to a new customer. And so just a huge, huge difference there of why you should concentrate on building a core repeat purchase user base. The second reason why you should care is retention, meaning somebody buying again from you is twice as impactful as acquisition in growing the bottom line. So profitability is what I refer to the bottom line. So retention, getting someone to purchase again and again from you is much more impactful in your overall profitability, twice as impactful in fact than acquiring a new customer. Now, it's not to, I'm certainly not advocating don't ever try, acquire new customers, just focus on, what you have and grow them. There's clearly a balance to be had between those two types of new customers versus existing customers. But typically from what we've seen, not nearly enough attention is spent on retaining customers and growing repeat purchases from existing customers. People are always just thinking about acquiring new customers, which gets more expensive over time because you typically get your early adopters, you might be able to acquire quite cheaply, and then your product might be quite niche, and then it's just harder and harder to acquire new customers. So getting that balance right is different for each business. But as I said, typically most people focus on new customer acquisition as opposed to retention and repeat purchase from your existing customer base. So how do I calculate customer lifetime value is the third one. So remember, this is focused on profitability of each individual customer here. And so you need to add up the total profits per unit sale for each of these customers. And so let's, gross revenue is where you would start. Of course, if there are sort of promotions, discounts and whatever else that go with that, you of course subtract that out. And then you would subtract things like your sales tax and all Amazon related fees. And so that's FBA, seller for Prime, FBM, referral fees, storage fees, all those sort of things, any Amazon related fees. And then cost of goods sold. So what does it cost you to manufacture the good and the freight costs and all that, getting into an Amazon warehouse, etc. So you need to strip out all those costs. And then you would subtract out advertising spend as well. And that's, simplified. I mean, if you really want to go into detailed customer lifetime value calculations, I can give you a formula that is 2 pages long, but this is certainly really, really good enough for right now. And the other thing to say is, we've sort of separated out advertising spend from the other costs there. So the middle box scales linearly with each purchase, meaning every repeat purchase that an individual makes, that one of your customer makes, that those set of costs, so sales tax, Amazon fees, and cost of goods sold, are typically going to remain proportional to and linear to what they purchase there, and to a large extent, those are much harder to change, right? Like sales tax is sales tax. You're not going to be able to change that. Amazon very much dictates the terms of what their fees are. You don't, again, have much of a say in that. And your cost of goods sold, you can try and negotiate better deals, with suppliers and things like that. But again, it's quite difficult to do. It takes a very long time, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas on the other hand, you've got advertising spend here. And so this is something that is largely within your control. And in most cases is a once-off cost to acquire a customer. So you show them an ad, they convert on that. And then, a lot of the behavior would be, they might want to reorder it. And so in an Amazon context, they might just go back to their order history and reorder it, or sign up to subscribe and save, et cetera, et cetera. So generally speaking, the advertising cost tends to be a once-off cost and is within your control. So that's how we would go about calculating customer lifetime value. And this brings us to your point, Assaf, at the beginning of this section, which is, what is the limit of ACOS? And so really ACOS is just focused on the profitability of the first sale, right? And so when you're logging into Seller Central, soon to be Amazon advertising, so they're migrating, all the Seller Central ad stuff to Amazon advertising. Anyway, so you log into your ad console, Amazon calculates an ACOS. How much did you spend for someone to make, a sale or place an order? And is that profitable or not? But of course, the huge issue with it is that it's only considering the first sale. And so what if that ad spend contributed to future profits? So if you think about, that journey that I outlined right at the beginning here, that ACOS is only concerned with stage 1. It has no visibility into what's happening, stage 2, 3, 4, for instance. And so we think it's quite a misleading metric if you're thinking about customer lifetime value in particular. So let's just put a very super basic example here. On the left-hand side, you spend $10. The ad sale is 20, and you get an ACOS of 50, which is not particularly great. But actually, let's assume scenario 2 here, where what happens is that customer makes 3 more purchases of the same amount. So that's, for argument's sake, it's the same product over the course of the year. So you still spent that same $10 to acquire that person, but they made 4 purchases of 20 for a total of 80. And actually, instead of an ACOS of 50, now that you've taken into account all 4 of those purchases, that true ACOS, as we call it, is actually 12.5%. So it's a very, very, very different picture to if you're just measuring ACOS off the first sale, basically. So just picking up on that, how do you use this information to your advantage, right? So if you're focusing on this true ACOS, is a real game changer in our view, and such a core part of our proposition when working with our customers. It basically means that you can spend more on advertising to acquire a customer than most of your competitors, because competitors are judging things. Most of the competitors, anyway, are going to be judging things on an ACOS basis, just on that first sale. But if you have that information to know that typically somebody makes 1 additional purchase, 10 additional purchases, or whatever it may be, you can afford to spend a lot more on acquiring that person. But your break even just becomes very, very different and a lot higher. So scenario 1 there, for instance, if supplements have a higher customer lifetime value than face cream, and let's assume you're selling both of those things, then you can focus a lot more of your budget on supplements. You can afford to acquire a customer at a much higher cost than your competitors, and you can outbid them in the PPC campaigns, and you can steal market share from them. They're not going to be able to compete with you because you have this information. And a more subtle case that we've seen in scenario 2 there is if a low value item leads to a purchase of a higher value item down the line, again, you're in this position where you can outbid your competitors. So we saw this with one of our customers last year, where they sold a bunch of different types of dog products. And the first purchase was typically a very low price item. It was like $8 or $9, for instance. But actually, if you looked at the data, 20% of the time, within, I think it was 4 months, that customer, 20% of the time, a customer would then go and buy a much, much higher value item. So something in the region of like $40, $50. I think it was a dog bed, much further down the line. And so if you're starting to add up what that customer lifetime value is and use that information in your PPC campaigns, you can outbid your competitors, because you're fighting for, firstly, not many people are going to be advertising for an $8 or $9 item in the first place. Out of the people that do, the margins are so thin as measured on an ACOS basis that they're really not going to be able to spend much or afford much. Whereas you have this information now of what happens after that first purchase. And so we've seen some game-changing results, not just in terms of profitability, but also just gaining market share as well as a result of that. So very, very powerful tools on how to use customer lifetime value for PPC in terms of budget allocation and profitability.
I'd like to add one thing into that. Very interesting.
Yeah, sure.
The way that you should measure your ACOS is actually on the total cost of sales. Okay, total sales. How much?
Yeah. So
compare it for month to month, compare it quarter to quarter. And then you have a good measurement of what is your advertising cost or marketing expenses. Let's call it. You are running a business, right? So Amazon is running a business, and you need to strategize and balance the budget according to the total sales. Okay, not just about to the specific
ad sales.
Like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll it's part of our core metrics. So we would do. We would do all of these things. So meaning we would certainly report an ACOS for those who are just used to it, right? Even though, our preference is to do this true ACOS of repeat purchases. But of course, total ACOS is extremely important as well. Just understanding your ad spend divided by total sales is extremely important for tracking and trying to quantify the ad campaign's contribution to organic as well.
Yes. Okay.
So just some tips. I guess this is close the last slide on customer lifetime value. So some tips for increasing your customer lifetime value. How is it that you can increase it over time? Clearly, some products are just more inherently suited to repeat purchases, right? I mean, the sort of canonical example is obviously razors and razor blades, right? Pioneered by Gillette and all that. But supplements and things like that are just tailor-made for repeat purchases. But subscribe and save campaigns, right? Or subscribe and saves in general are just very, very useful. So clearly, if you offer a discount, that's fine. But just take a long-term view of how many repeat purchases somebody will make. So that's pushing a subscribe and save is obviously a good thing to do. You can increase your average order value as well to increase the lifetime value. So Shanil mentioned it a little bit earlier around 3 for 2 offers and bundling, etc., which is number 3 as well, around bundling. So you can look at the most frequently bought together items out of your own portfolio and think about bundling those as well. In the US, they're doing virtual bundles now, so you don't have to. I think in the UK it hasn't rolled out yet. I could be wrong on that, but you don't have to do the bundling yourself. Amazon can do it on your behalf. You do need to create a new listing, etc., as well. But again, these are ways of increasing the profitability of each individual customer, and then adding complementary products. Now, not everyone's in a position to create and market and launch new products, etc. But you can get quite good data on what items are, what ASINs are people comparing your product to, and often they're competitors, but often they're actually complementary items as well. And so you can get quite, from brand analytics, you can understand those. You can understand that data sets and try to think about if you're going to launch a complementary product, you can get the data for that. So those are some of the ways to increase your customer lifetime value there. And then
how you can help Amazon sellers? How do you work with Amazon sellers to help them reaching to these customers?
So on the customer lifetime value side, that's coming out of our retail analytics products, and so particularly for sellers, we need obviously access to your data. So we need access to your advertising data. We need access to your retail data. That's done via Amazon's APIs, and so it's a 30-second process on granting us access to your data. And then, of course, we just need to understand your business goals. We need to understand, the KPIs, etc., where your business is at, what you want it to look like, all those sorts of things. And then we can offer, this lifetime value, along with a whole bunch of other, analytics as well, geographic breakdown of your sales, and a whole bunch of other things as part of the retail analytics. But I guess the core offering is just understanding the retail data, the lifetime value, and then how does that impact your PPC side of things as well. So of course we need your data to do that. Super easy to do, and would certainly be happy if anyone reaches out to have a discussion, a call on how we can support you. So on the right there, of course, it wouldn't be complete without some sort of special offer. So what we've done is one of the products, as I mentioned right at the beginning, is a audit of your account. We have different levels of this. There's sort of a quite limited but free version of it. But for this offer, we've put in a pro audit, which is worth £250, plus a follow-up call with Shanil or one of his team to go through the results. And so just to recap what the PPC audit tool is, at least, and the pro version specifically, we can audit your PPC campaigns over the last 60 days. We can both give you, the reports will give you insights both into the sort of more strategic areas, like are you spending your budget on the right sort of match types, given, if it's are you spending too much on research campaigns on auto and broad, even though it's a very mature product, for instance. But we'll also give you very, very specific advice and saying, here are the top 3 terms that we think that are under optimized, right? And so you should migrate these to exact match, because they're working very well, but they're sitting in a broad campaign, for instance. And so for those who are, let's say, very sort of time limited, and you want to know a very sort of quick way to 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes on optimize your campaigns, this audit will tell you exactly where to focus. And so this is typically hours and hours and hours of work to do. And so we've automated that whole process. It's typically worth £250 per audit. But we're, for anyone who's on this webinar, you can do that for free. Plus, we'll give you a call as well to go through the results.
I think one more thing is one more thing I want to add is, as well as, sorry, you want to go? I'll go.
Sure.
I think one thing I want to add is you can also identify what are the search terms that you're wasting your budget on, in terms of, like Rael was saying, there was a client that was spending thousands of pounds onto, was Amazon Prime, for example, where they didn't even realize they were spending so much money on that. So we'll report for you the top, search term that you're wasting your budget on, that you should negate or bid down on, which is, in terms of optimization as well.
Yeah, and I use one of these reports, and it looks like very good. It's very helpful to really identify key metrics and things that specific search term that you can save a lot of money with, and I do recommend using it. It's a very good one. So we're going to post a link on the bottom of the page that people will be able to access that.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Okay. Rael, I would like to thank you very much. It was great information. I think it's very useful for our community. And, we are looking for the next, month to come. And what do you believe will be with Amazon in the next few months?
Yeah, that's a good question. And firstly, it was great session. Really enjoyed it. So looking forward, I guess, for the next month, I do think it's going to vary country by country, right? And so as each government takes a separate approach to easing lockdown or continuing with lockdown, that's certainly going to affect Amazon and demand and supply, right? I think there's also political risk in this. So in France, for instance, the government actually ordered some of the warehouses to cease operations, for instance, right? And so they weren't happy with the safety measures in the Amazon warehouse, and so there's definitely political risk there that could happen as well. And so I think that's certainly something to watch out for. The general trend, I guess, at least throughout Europe, is a slight easing of the restrictions. Now, each country is going to be doing that very differently, right? And so schools might open at a different time to, other things. And so, will people still be buying kids' puzzles or kids' games and stuff like that if schools are expected to open from the 1st of June like they are in the UK? Maybe not, right? And so, you can't take a one size fits all here. You've really got to look at each of the geographies that you're operating in and try synchronize that to how the governments effectively are easing the lockdown restrictions. And I guess one of the key things to watch out for is if the announcement today is that on the 1st of June, all things being well, schools are going to reopen. Does that mean people just don't buy anything as soon as the announcement is made around kids' games? Or do they say, look, we've still got like 2.5 weeks, I'm still going to buy something? So like, do they start taking action from when the announcement is made, or do they start taking an action from the 1st of June when it's they're actually going to go back to school, for instance? So I think those things are definitely need to be monitored. But as Shanil was saying earlier on, Amazon on the supply side, at least, it's not, they're allowing promotions to take place now. They are easing the restrictions on the top 6 categories and, things like that. So there is a bit of a return to normalcy. But it's not to say that, as I said, it could be political risk around shutting down an Amazon warehouse in France and you're kind of back to square one again. Or there's a second wave. Let's all hope that, of course, that doesn't happen. But there's a second wave of infections, and then again you're back to square one. And so a lot of customers have been looking, how do I diversify the logistics between FBA and FBM, or all those options. And we've come across some companies that are offering fulfilled by merchant as a service, for instance, right? And so looking to diversify that could, it can seem like a sensible strategy as well. So I know that's quite a long answer, but it's difficult to say, but it does need quite a granular approach.
I can tell you and share with you that here in Israel, they released us, to do our activity, but it's go very slowly. It's not just one boom. And my kids, which are going to schools, are stepping very slowly from different grades to different behaviors. And I see that the way that people buy, it's also is different than it used to be. But
yeah, exactly. And they're saying as well, like, you know, even if schools go back on the 1st of June, it's kind of like, I don't know, 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, or 2 weeks from home, or, you know, whatever it is. And so it's not that, you know, 1st of June, they're all going to be back at school full time again or something, you know, that kind of thing. So clearly that's going to, you know, affect your demand and buying patterns, etc. So really just understanding each path out of the lockdown is critical for that. And those things change, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the UK government, for instance, has changed course a couple times, right? Depending on, I don't know, data and events happening and things like that. So just because you know what the plan is for the UK on Sunday night because the Prime Minister made a speech, doesn't mean you sit back for a month, right? He could get on the TV this evening and announce something different. So,
okay.
I think the other thing as well is so on the consumer side, you know, people have been made furlough, losing their job. It's just that when they do go back to employment again, is, you know, these companies are not going to be running at full capacity. So in most cases, you know, a lot of these jobs are going to be, you know, cut off, meaning that there's not much disposable income out there to spend. So it's just, there's a lot of factors that Rael said, right? It's just so many moving parts at the moment. It's hard to really know what's going to happen.
Okay, I really appreciate for having you guys. It was very helpful for our community. I think it was great information, and, you know, hoping that this time will be over and we'll move into new areas.
Indeed, and thank you very much for having us. Very much appreciated, Assaf.
Thank you, Assaf. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cool. So thank you for having the time with us in AMZ Your Way. So I will going to bring you a lot of more content and information about Amazon, different tactics, this different information that can be useful for you. So you'll be able to maximize your sales and enjoy until the next time. Cheers.